think the countries are working on, is for the IMF to be strengthened and reinforced, to be ready in case there's any problem, to have enough resources to be able to contribute to stabilizing the situation. And that, when the IMF comes, of course, it is not charity. There will be terms, conditions, conditionality, and very painful adjustments. And I think the countries are working on this. In Cannes, this was one of the issues which was being discussed, how we could gather resources from different countries, including China, to build up the IMF, what the IMF has at its disposal. And I think that is the right way to do it. As far as China's domestic policies are concerned, increasing imports is of course a simple, direct way to describe it. But we are talking about longer term opening up the economy, continuing with the liberalization and the reforms, continuing to be open to investments from the rest of the world, continuing to restructure your economy and to provide social safety nets, for example, so people can shift the balance between saving for the future and consuming what they need now, some of it consuming, some of it investing on infrastructure which you need. So these are structural issues which you have to do, even for your own benefit. The exchange rate is one of the things which you have to think about. The Chinese government is, of course, very careful in this, and they have to be very cautious because it can affect the whole Chinese economy. But I believe that as part of the overall adjustment in stance which the Chinese economy is endeavoring to make, the exchange rate has a contribution to make too, because it can help the restructuring which is taking place. The Guangdong Party Secretary Wang Yang says, 腾笼换鸟, to open the cage and change the bird inside, to change the structure of the economy. And some pressure on the companies to restructure, to upgrade themselves, to improve their productivity from the exchange rate, I think is helpful. And internationally, I think doing that will ease your relations with important trading partners, and that is in China's long-term interest.
And some American politicians have been very vocal lately. Secretary Clinton even said it's time for us to stand up and face China and to form an international alliance to deal with it. Sometimes, as we discussed in Shanghai last year, Singapore has very close ties with both China and the United States. When you observe what's happening between the U.S. and China, what would you advise the U.S. to do to have an easier approach?
Well, the U.S. has a difficulty because every 4 years they have elections. And in the preparation for elections, the candidates have to make strident statements to distinguish themselves and show that they are defending America's interests. If they win, whoever wins, and sitting in the White House or the State Department or the Defense Department, looking at the world and America's position in it, they have to understand that they have to work with partners, and that China needs to be a partner, and they moderate that position. And this happened to many U.S. presidents. This happened to to Bill Clinton, to George W. Bush, and we see the Republican candidates now making some quite fierce statements. I think they will have to moderate that position if they win. With this administration, I think that there have been issues, which is understandable. But at the same time, there have been accommodations, and I think there is quiet cooperation taking place behind the scenes, which I hope will be able to continue. If I were to advise the Americans, I would say you have to work with China because it has to be your partner, and you do not want to make it an enemy. And it does not have to be your enemy because it is possible for both sides to work together, and both sides have become interdependent. And in fact to mutual benefit. So this is something where you have to be able to explain to Americans how they're benefiting from this partnership already, and why it's necessary to take a long-term view, and there must be give and take. From China's point of view, I would say that you are developing, you're an emerging economy, but you will need America for a long time as a source of investments, as a market, and as a superpower which is going to be more powerful than China for many, many years to come. Even when China's economy may overtake America's and become the biggest in the world, which maybe may happen within the next 20 years, just because of the numbers of the size of your population. But your per capita income, your technology, your ability to organize yourself and develop outreach around the world through multinationals, your soft power will not be at that level for many years to come. And for China, I think it is in your interest to have a friend with the United States. And it is possible to do so.
Singapore invests heavily around the world, and China is beginning
not so heavily. We are very small.
And China is beginning to do so as well. And what do you think is the perception of Chinese investment going overseas, Chinese money flowing around the world, and the kind of role it plays in the world economy today?
I think it varies, and if it's just a financial investment in the stock market, or you buy the Dow Jones Index, spiders or something like that, then of course it's not sensitive and people are happy to have it. Sometimes people want you to come and invest, like the Europeans say, please buy my bonds. But other times it's more sensitive. I mean, when CNOT tried to buy Unocal in America some years ago, that raised a lot of concerns. When Huawei tried to buy a small American company last year or earlier this year, there were also concerns, and they had to withdraw the bid. So there are sensitivities, maybe on technology. There will be sensitivities on political grounds. You saw a difficulty in Canada, I think I can't remember which state, Alberta. They wanted to buy one mining company, and there was a tremendous reaction, and you had to pull back. And the state government had to say no. So China has to realize that there will be political sensitivities, and you have to work in a way which will be acceptable and which will be seen to be win-win and not predatory. And to take a long-term view of matters. Because you may feel that it is completely commercial, but you have to understand that the Western perception and the external perception may be that many of your companies will actually be acting on behalf of the Chinese government, of the state. And that is a perception which will take some years to dispel.
Sometimes China's sovereign wealth fund generate criticism domestically as well when they make investments in companies such as Blackstone, a subject matter we previously discussed as well. But it seems to us that its Singaporean counterpart, Temasek, does not generate criticism.
Sometimes it does, but we are much smaller, so maybe the anxiety is less. But there are sensitivities. We have had occasions when we have wanted to invest in America, and it has required some delicate maneuvering in order to reassure the Americans that we mean no harm and that this is a completely commercial proposition. Our explanation to people and our consistent policy has been that organizations like Temasek or GIC operate totally commercially, and they have their independent governance. They do not take instructions from the government. We appoint people to run them, and they run them, and they have the mandate to operate purely on a commercial basis, making strictly economic calculations, so that they're not there to further some nefarious intention of the Singapore government. And I think the Chinese CIC have also explained that they're trying to operate commercially too. But you need time to show that this is so and to persuade people that indeed this is a reality. But then sometimes they forget, and they say, please invest to rescue Greece or to rescue Italy. And then we have to say, but we have to make commercial decisions, remember? You were trying to tell us that we ought to make decisions purely commercially.
You just made some comments about the Chinese currency, RMB, and you're well above the Chinese government's ambition to internationalize RMB, making RMB part of the currencies of the SDR, the IMF, etc., etc. What might be some of Singapore's incentives or plans to help China further develop its financial sector, offshore financial?
We are a significant financial center in Asia, not the only one, but a significant one. And we hope to service the countries around us, including China. And as part of this comprehensive menu of services, we hope that the ability to offer renminbi-related accounts, renminbi-based accounts and services will be one of them. And so that other participants can use a renminbi for their transactions, and Chinese companies can operate in Singapore and use Singapore as a basis to do business all over Asia. So we are happy that the Chinese government has allowed Singapore financial institutions to do some renminbi as services. It will take some time to build up, but gradually. It's not so easy to say we want to internationalize the renminbi, because you have to make some quite difficult decisions, the extent to which you're going to free up currency controls, capital controls, and allow free flow of currency into China, out of China, which can affect your domestic economy, and which can also impact on your financial institutions, your banks. Are you prepared to do that? I think up to now, China has been prepared to have the trade account open, so you can buy and sell quite freely using renminbi. But if you want to take capital on the capital account, if I want to take a renminbi long position and speculate that it will appreciate, or take a short position and bet that it will fall, I don't think the Chinese government or the PBOC will look kindly on me, for understandable reasons. So as long as that is your attitude, I think it is not so easy to internationalize the use of the renminbi.
How will you differentiate Singapore's competitiveness and Hong Kong's competitiveness when it comes to finance?
We are in different positions. Hong Kong, of course, is on China's doorstep and very tightly integrated into the Chinese economy. We are not so close physically to China, and I think also in terms of our economic networks, we are more omnidirectional. And therefore, from Singapore, companies and banks can service China as well as India, as well as Southeast Asia, as well maybe to some extent Australia and New Zealand. And so it's a different role. And there are MNCs whose China business they may manage out of Hong Kong, but whose Asia business they will want to manage out of Singapore, because then you get a more all-rounded view. So I think we have different roles to play.
For decades, Chinese businessmen and media have been trying to decode and to explain Singapore's economic miracle. And you've been visiting China at least once or twice a year for the past decade. Would you say that what's similar between Singapore and China, China's economic success is constantly opening up and create institutional frameworks and reforms to facilitate that?
Well, certainly that is how China has done it very successfully, to connect with the world. Singapore also has taken the attitude that we have to connect with the world, because if we close up on ourselves, we will starve to death. It is not possible. China, you might imagine it is more possible because you're bigger, but the results of opening up have shown that the dividends from being part of the global economy are enormous. And I hope China will continue to move in this direction steadily, while adjusting, developing the infrastructure, the systems and the governance, so that you can manage an economy which is now less susceptible to central control. When you were in the old days, you could just direct banks, lend or don't lend, or lend to this group of these companies or this group of companies, and roughly you can get the direction right, and overall that is good enough for the economy to grow. But with a more complicated economy, that may not work, cannot work anymore, and you have to decide. You have to find ways to manage credit to manage lending